Good morning, everybody. Beautiful spring day here in Canton, Illinois, and the drive across from dear old Bushnell was stunning, just beautiful. My reflection this morning is called Rural Life, Love, and Labor. When I was a child growing up in the city, a beautiful Sunday afternoon might find my family out what we like to call going for a ride in the country. And I'm just wondering if anybody else here ever did that. Well, my fond memories of this time in the late 1950s and the early 1960s especially would include driving south out of Columbus, Ohio on US Route 23, perhaps to visit the Adena State Memorial, the gracious stone home of one-time Governor Thomas Worthington near Chillicothe along the Scioto River and in the Appalachian foothills. Or perhaps we might have driven east or west on US 40. Historically, Thomas Jefferson's National Road that brought so many people over the Appalachian Mountains in Conestoga wagons to spread out across the Midwest, including Illinois for that matter. If we headed east, we could explore small towns in and near the Allegheny Plateau with the dusty antique shops my mother and I loved to haunt. And if we headed west on US 40 toward the flatter, richer farmland, we could visit my mother's Adams cousins or one of her high school friends whose family owned Hollandia Gardens, a nursery with fascinating greenhouses, no longer there today. If we went southeast along US 33 toward Canal Winchester and again toward the Allegheny Plateau, we might go to a dairy farm that sold this absolutely delicious vanilla ice cream flowing with creamy milk and heavenly honey. Now, it may seem heretical for me to say so, but I liked it better than mint chocolate chip at the time. Sometimes we would make a whole day trip southeast toward Athens and the Hocking Hills, state parks in that area of the Allegheny Plateau, romantically named Old Man's Cave, Cedar Falls, and the like. This is still sacred land, and at the time it was surrounded by the ravages of coal mining. Now, all of these trips, and many more, were with three older brothers in the station wagon. You might remember the windows rolled down with no air conditioning. Far too many comments about the sights, sounds, and smells of the country landscape, and no seat belts. Still, all of this allowed me to survive so that rural life could become my lifelong passion. Rural life was something romantic then. Before the vastness of sprawl had set in around Columbus, there were diverse landscapes within a short drive of the city. Historical sites, all of the seasonal changes, natural spaces, and different ways of garnering a living from the land or in the small towns. Those rides in the country brought me closer to something I yearned for and still seek out. A peaceful feeling, sometimes harder to find in the city. Rural life and land demonstrate the beauty of God's creation in the works of human hands or in nature left more or less wild and untouched. Human hands, or the impacts of our lives, have of course touched all of the land around the world by now, for better or for worse. Still, to me at least, the mystery and the beauty of it all seeks to endure. Perhaps our readings today illustrate a way to understand, some of our deepest needs and feelings about rural landscapes and their inhabitants, expressed in the love of our Creator. Psalm 23, and thank you, Gordon, for its beautiful reading, is literally a pastoral view of rural life, with its quietly stunning images of a shepherd whose needs are fulfilled with God in nature. Green pastures and still waters restore the soul. Surely this is the right path, the path of God in all of its righteousness, free from fear, filled with peace. Just as importantly, but unspoken, this psalm is not only about the shepherd. It is about the whole flock. When the shepherd feels safe, the whole flock feels safe, and perhaps really is safe, at least for now. Remember, God's creatures can almost always read our calm and our fear. Rural life in America still has its pastoralism and its romanticism that can calm our often turbulent lives. Not only on this rural Sunday, but every day. We need to be especially grateful for our natural bounty and beauty, whether worked by human hands or left alone, that vitalize our physical and spiritual peace and overall well-being, part of the covenant our Creator has made with us. At the same time, however, I often view the rural landscape with some alarm, including the intensive use of farmland that certainly boosts our farm productivity now, but because of the way things are done, might affect our health, and certainly has serious implications for the environment, our soil, our water, our air, and our fellow creatures, even in these present times. And the grinding poverty that you often see on the back roads and in the small towns of the United States, as well as across many rural parts of the world. When I consider recent and proposed domestic environmental policy changes, I grow more fearful. No one wants to be Chicken Little, but I would, if time permitted, argue strenuously that the new direction of the country's environmental policies is dangerous and rejects ethical and spiritual understandings of the way we must treat God's sacred creation that is entrusted to our hands in our rural areas. Our earth is the house of the Creator. At our best, we help set the table in our everyday kindnesses of working, eating, and drinking, and perhaps sharing stories of thankfulness for the goodness that comes to us from rural places here and around the world. Sometimes we don't do such a good job at the labor or the love for each other and the land. Jesus suggests the crux of our problem as stewards of rural life in all of its forms in Matthew. The harvest is plentiful, but the laborers are few. Today, in an industrialized rural world, there's perhaps a tinge of irony in this statement. Farm mechanization sent so many people off the farms and into other rural and urban jobs. Our country towns and small cities have suffered from this phenomenon for well over a century, clear back to 1900 and even before that at least. With population loss, and that has been all but constant in many parts of rural America, including our home here in Western Illinois. And the problem has left us with few human laborers. So how do we, generally a diminishing and aging rural people, appreciate our rural landscape and the wide variety of life that it supports, not only on farms? What do those of us who do not live on farms have to offer to rural life? We live in a rural area here, but many, possibly even ourselves, are basically divorced from direct connections with rural life. We're surrounded by the farms, the fields, the grasslands, and the forests, and the wonderful stuff of God's loving and living creation. But how close are we really to the gift of our abundant rural life. Why, 2,000 years or so ago, did Jesus travel across the countryside, making statements about plentiful harvests and scarce labor? Do we see the problem in our life today? Matthew tells us that Jesus went to the towns and villages, teaching, healing, and proclaiming the good news. Even before his death, Jesus shared the redemptive work of God on earth, calling disciples, healing the sick and the needy, and sowing the seed of the Spirit, building the church that we now call Christian. He promised a plentiful harvest then, but Jesus, the Son of God, still needs workers. He still needs us to carry on that work begun 2,000 plus years ago. The ministry of Jesus, it was empathetic, and it still is empathetic, full of love. He had compassion for the crowds because they were harassed and helpless, like sheep without a shepherd. He wanted to lead the people then, and us now, to green pastures and still waters, a place where all of us can live without fear and with peace. He wants us to help in that labor, offering frightened souls, including ourselves, a place at home around the human and divine table of life and love. When I was a child living in the city, going for a ride in the country was fun, great fun, and perhaps even a luxury, even with 3 older brothers who could inflict fear in many different forms. It didn't deter me, and I found my calling. Rural life, whatever criticisms I may offer and whatever fears I may have, is my evolving vocation. All in one way or another, part of trying to understand the goodness of God's creation. Even in a rapidly changing world where the human touch can be all too heavy, there remains solace and grace in loving work for and with rural places and people. The harvest remains great, even in our age of bounty. And indeed, we are few laborers, as much in need of overcoming our own fears as we are in need of answering the call to Christian love and labor, whatever the risks, whatever the rewards. Loving labor toward a better rural life, endowed with the blessings of our Creator God, begins with us, the people of this church, in the city of Canton, in rural Fulton County, wherever we are called to teach, to heal, and to proclaim the good news with our deepest love and understanding that overcomes fears and offers a way to peace of a bountiful harvest near still waters.